It happened in just a few seconds, one question, one reaction, and suddenly Kash Patel was on the defensive in a way nobody expected. Because when you're leading the most powerful investigative agency in the country, the last thing you want is to be asked on live camera why taxpayer money seems to be flying you to UFC fights, hockey games, and weekend getaways. And the moment that question landed, you could see it. Patel tried to smile, tried to brush it off, but the tension hit instantly. Viewers could feel it, lawmakers could feel it, and even Patel himself knew this wasn't a small misunderstanding.
Just at the outset, I just want to say what I think all of us believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can rest and relax and not then continue to provide information to local law enforcement and to you. So that was a mistake.
I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as something working with the public to identify that there was a subject
So if
in
you
custody.
if you put out a statement that says we've got our man, and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake?
But that's not what I said.
Well, I'll go on. That's my understanding. A second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go. And I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position, correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller? Is that right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family, yes. I know this.
Okay, and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it fairly narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, you know, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as you can
the
agree.
So-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
Again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling you.
No, that's right. Let me ask you another question. You know, when you were here, you were rightly critical, not here actually, I guess it was on Cash's corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country. Let me ask you this. You know, on the weekend of, according to flight tracker data, on the weekend of March 7th, an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson, and I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Okay. In April 5th, well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
You know, you got to use some judgment here.
So when I'm at home, I can't do what I'm doing when I go home. Everybody else is allowed to go home, just not me.
Let me keep going. No, I'm glad you go home. I love to go home. But I don't go home on a private jet. On April 5th,
they're not mandated to do so.
You attended a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky, and Flight Tracker says the FBI jet took you to and from New York City, where you don't live, right?
That's correct.
And on April 12th, on the following weekend, you attended a UFC a fight in Miami, also on the FBI jet, right?
That's correct.
So what's the cost to the taxpayer for those 3 flights?
Well, I pay the commercial equivalent per the regs and the law. And so just so you know, when you are comparing me to prior directors.
I asked what the cost was, and you don't know, I take it.
Yeah, and what I've done with the use of the private jet is use Andrews Air Force Base versus Reagan National as what the other directors have done to save the taxpayer dollars.
Bottom line here, you flew home to Las Vegas. There's nobody else in the FBI who gets paid. They have to pay their own way if they want to go home, right? I mean, right?
Well, that's not accurate. Depending on where you're stationed, the FBI covers the bill to get home.
So are you telling me that FBI agents who are assigned in Washington, but who may live in Charlotte, they get paid by the FBI to
Sometimes
go home?
they do, yes.
Right. Another thing I want to say is this. You know, our local law enforcement has been stiffed. About $500 million in COP grants have been taken out of the budget. Those really help us in Burlington. They help us in Rutland. They really are important. And why in the world would we be cutting those cop grants when we need that local law enforcement, in part to partner with you?
Well, I
Do
think
you
you're speaking.
support that?
I think you're speaking to the Department of Justice grants, which I don't adjudicate, but also Vermont, just like every other state, has received a plus-up of FBI personnel.
Well, I'll tell you, that's not what we're seeing. The other thing, my understanding is that there's a requisition or an effort to get another plane for the FBI that would cost about $72 million. Is that right?
That's inaccurate. The FBI, because the jet, as you call it, is not my jet. We use it for operational needs. We use it for FTOX. We use it for HRT.
But that's the one you fly in, right?
We have multiple fixed-wing assets, and one of them is on a wildly expensive lease that I deemed a waste of money, and I'm looking for a replacement in which the government can procure assets permanently.
Well, I would welcome you submitting to this committee the cost information about the jets that are under consideration. And according to our research, the specifications that are included in this request would result in an expenditure of between $72 million and $80 million.
That's inaccurate, but I'll happily get you the right
I
numbers.
welcome getting the specific information.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
This was the kind of moment that exposes what happens behind the scenes in government agencies that rarely ever get challenged. But Welch didn't just ask a question, he walked Patel straight into a trap he couldn't escape. He pulled out flight logs, dates, locations, and a pattern of trips that didn't look like official business. The room went silent, and even Patel's tone shifted. Because this wasn't a debate over policy. This was about trust, accountability, and whether the director of the FBI's entire operation was using public resources like a personal chauffeur service. And the shocking part, Patel's first reaction wasn't denial. It wasn't an attempt to prove he wasn't on those trips. It was a defensive snap. I live in Las Vegas. I can go home. The frustration in his voice said everything, but that wasn't the whole story. Welch was only warming up. He pointed out the Las Vegas UFC event Patel attended with Mel Gibson, then a New York hockey game with Wayne Gretzky, then another UFC event in Miami, all tracked through the same FBI jet. Viewers online have speculated about whether these trips were part of official business, though there's no confirmation. Even so, Welch's point cut through the noise. If the top official gets these privileges, what does that say to every regular agent who has to pay their own way home? The comparison wasn't subtle, it wasn't meant to be. It was a reminder that perception matters. And when the public sees a jet being used for sports events and celebrity outings, that perception shifts fast. Welch didn't yell. He didn't grandstand. He kept his voice steady and let the facts do the damage. And that's what made the moment hit harder. Because Patel's defense claiming Congress required the use of the jet didn't answer the core issue. Nobody forced him to attend UFC fights, nobody mandated hockey games, nobody approved flying to Miami for a weekend event on a federal aircraft. And when Welch asked Patel directly about the cost to taxpayers, Patel hesitated. Even if he does pay the commercial equivalent, the public still foots the bill for the actual flight. The gap between technical compliance and ethical judgment was suddenly exposed under bright lights. And the shift in Patel's body language gave the audience something else to think about. His tone turned short. His answers clipped. He repeated phrases instead of expanding on them. It was the reaction of someone who felt cornered, not by politics but by the weight of evidence sitting right in front of him. That alone made viewers lean in even closer. Because when government officials react like that, it's usually a sign there's more under the surface. And Welch knew it. Which is why he didn't stop there. The questioning took a turn the moment Welch reminded Patel of something many viewers forgot: messaging matters. A few months earlier, Patel had publicly declared, "We got our man," during a high-stakes case before confirmation was secured. For regular people that might sound like confidence. For law enforcement, it can be dangerous. It changes public behavior. It affects cooperation. It can even compromise an investigation. Welch reminded him of that, pointing out that announcing something prematurely isn't a harmless mistake, it's a messaging failure that can alter the entire direction of a case. Patel pushed back, saying he was only trying to help the public identify suspects. But Welch didn't let that slide. Because in federal investigations you don't get to make off-the-cuff statements. You don't get to impact public safety with casual wording, and you definitely don't get to change the narrative when the truth catches up. The room could feel the tension rise again. This wasn't about a suspect anymore. It was about whether Patel understood the responsibility that came with the power he held. And just when the audience thought the exchange couldn't get more intense, Welch revealed something that instantly shifted the atmosphere. He brought up Brian Driscoll, a senior FBI agent with nearly 2 decades of elite service, a man who had led hostage rescue teams, worked high-intensity missions, and earned commendations that few agents ever receive. Reports claim Driscoll faced termination after defending agents assigned to January 6 investigations, though Patel didn't confirm the exact reasoning. Welch painted it as a deeper moral issue. What does it say about the FBI if someone with Driscoll's experience feels punished for standing up for his team? Patel admitted Driscoll was fired, but avoided explaining the context. That silence was powerful. It added a layer of uncertainty, a sense that something bigger was happening behind closed doors. And viewers could feel that tension, because when someone with Driscoll's background is pushed out, it forces people to wonder what internal pressures might be shaping decisions at the top. But Welch still wasn't done. He zoomed out from the personal cases to a national issue. It wasn't just about Patel's jet. It wasn't just about messaging. It wasn't even just about internal discipline. It was about resources. Welch pointed out that nearly $500 million had been cut from COP grants, which fund local police across the country. Departments that rely on these grants to keep neighborhoods safe were being squeezed. Burlington, Rutland, towns across his state, and many others. Officers on the ground were losing support. And while those cuts were happening, the FBI was allegedly exploring a new aircraft that could cost up to $72 million or more, based on some reports. Patel denied the number but didn't offer a clear alternative. And that silence again created a vacuum. Because when leadership appears to have access to premium resources while local officers lose funding, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. That's when the real message of the exchange came into focus. This wasn't simply about flights. It wasn't about sports events. It wasn't about travel logs or who sat next to whom in the stands. Welch used the jet debate as a doorway, a way to expose a bigger pattern of decisions that didn't line up with the needs of everyday law enforcement or the expectations of the public. And that's what made the confrontation powerful, because every viewer watching could feel that this wasn't about left or right. It wasn't about political teams. It was about fairness, trust, institutional integrity, questions that matter no matter who you vote for, where you live, or what party you support. Welch delivered his final point with the same calm precision he started with: transparency matters because public institutions only function when citizens believe in them. When trust erodes, everything else erodes with it. That subtle line hit harder than any direct accusation. It left Patel with nothing to push back on, because it wasn't a question, it was a truth anyone could understand. And the reaction. Patel finally admitted he would hand over the real cost numbers for the aircraft request. It wasn't a concession, it was an acknowledgement that the conversation wasn't going away, that people were paying attention, and that his answers would be scrutinized long after the hearing was over. When you look back at the exchange, it becomes clear why it resonated so much. It wasn't the shock value of a viral moment. It was the window into how leadership decisions ripple outward, how a single flight affects perception, how a premature statement affects public safety, how a personnel decision affects morale, how budget choices affect entire communities. These aren't small things, and Welch made sure viewers understood that. This wasn't just a political clash. It was a lesson in how government priorities expose what matters most, and who gets held accountable when things don't add up. If anything, this moment reminded everyone watching that transparency isn't optional. It's the backbone of public trust. And any time that trust is balanced on the edge of a private jet heading to a UFC fight, someone needs to be asking the hard questions. Thanks for watching. If you want more breakdowns like this covering the moments that reveal what's really happening behind the scenes, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's a lot more coming, and you won't want to miss the next one.